This is Pucks and Seven with Ryan Paton and Victoria Matiash.
Here's my question to you, Victoria. Don't worry,
Yes,
I'm not
Ryan.
mad. Don't worry. How far into January do you wish somebody a Happy New Year?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. Larry David of Seinfeld fame he caps it at the 3rd,
The
January 3rd. I
Okay.
think that is ultra conservative.
Okay.
To me, you have a couple of weeks.
Really? Couple
I-
weeks?
Am I I'm being too generous here, or
I don't know. I think to me today this is Monday, January
January the
6th.
6th.
So
In
Happy
the
New
morning.
Year. And
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. The New Year fell late last week. So I think this is a bit different this year because it's right after the weekend. So this is Monday after the first weekend of 2025. So now it's have a bad New Year. Have a bad year from now on.
And now you also
I'm
remembered that we did one on New Year's Day, so we already wished each other.
Oh,
a
right.
Happy
We
New Year.
did. Yeah. How soon? Hey, off to a rockin' start.
Happy
Anyway.
New Year again, Ryan Payton.
Yeah, see, continues. Pucks and Seven, Ryan Payne, Victoria Matiash. We are back. We have a very special guest coming. We always have
Yes.
great guests, but we're back to doing guests. And she is an author, and her resume, as we're going to go into it with her, is
Popping.
second. It's just incredible. So she's written a book, her second book that has to do with goalies in hockey. So the book is called Behind the Mask, and it's a revealing look at 12 of the greatest goalies in hockey history. Her name is Randy Druzin, and she will join us later on. I'm really looking forward to this, Vic.
Me too.
Seeing as we're going to do that, and then we usually do the two segments, but we're going to incorporate 7 topics into one segment, some from the East, some from the West. We'll talk about what's going on with Vegas, which is everything great. Look at the Pacific, among other topics as well. But let's begin with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Austin Matthews is back, and
Yes.
he looks better than he did when he came back before, and he looks probably as good as he has all season long.
There's no question of that. No question of that at all. Now, it's first of all, you can appreciate the points that he's put up so far.
Yeah.
That line again with Mitch Marner and Matthew Nyes. How badly is Matthew Nyes enjoying having Austin Matthews back in the lineup?
When
Hat trick
Matthews
of the other day and a couple of assists.
When Matthews came in the dressing room after it was announced during the day that he would play, Nyes probably, thank goodness you're back.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's go. And he did go. And he went big time. What I also like, never mind the production numbers, which I know Maple Leafs fans are going to appreciate, but just the way that he played physically again. This is the body and the figure that we had become accustomed to, not this season necessarily, but in general in his career. And watching him play physically again and look comfortable doing it, I think was key.
He has, the numbers are great, as you mentioned. First 2 games back, 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points, not bad. 8 shots, 11 shot attempts, 4 hits, 1 block shot, and 66% on draws. I'm going to throw all that aside. I want to focus on just on the 1 goal that he did score. When he dove against Boston to put that into the empty net, I thought there was a lot to say from that dive, Victoria. I just think if there was something a little bit, that was probably a test for him. Yes, I know you can get tested by getting something in the back and hit and bumped and all that. But I just thought, I don't think he would have done that before if he really wasn't feeling very good, because you never know. If he's not 100%, maybe 90%, if he dives a certain way and extends his body a certain way, it may come back to bite him. So I thought that play, to be honest, even though it was a pretty easy goal that he did, but it was a good effort. I thought that was really telling. That's my point.
Do you think he was sending a little bit of a message to all of us with that as well?
Yeah, possibly.
Right?
Possibly.
Look at me, look at what I'm doing again. So everybody can just relax. And I still think, does he play in the 4 Nations? Does he suit up for the U.S.? I mean, we have a ways to go. We've got the month of January and then a little bit of February to determine it. But right now I'm wondering, because he really, really wants to. Yeah. But the Maple Leafs also want their $13 million star to be healthy for the postseason. Never mind this regular season stuff. So it's going to be interesting how that decision comes out.
It's always a discussion. If it's the Olympics or any other of these tournaments, do we send our great players? What if something happens? But this is an interesting case because, look, he's still not 100%. No player is, but I don't want anything certainly to happen to him at the Four Nations, because that would be an absolute disaster for Toronto.
And he could benefit from the rest if he doesn't play as well.
He could.
Like go down to Cabo and lay on the beach or visit your parents and eat some Mexican food, whatever, right?
Yeah. Do whatever you want to do.
He would benefit from that. But at the same time, I know you and I are both very interested in this tournament. And selfishly, as a hockey fan, not a Leafs fan, as a hockey fan, the tournament is going to be better if he's participating. So there's that element as well.
Yeah. Should say this too. I know it was tough for Canada to bow out the way they did in the World Juniors, but congrats to the U.S. back-to-back. That's pretty impressive. They won in overtime. I mentioned that because Matthews is in U.S. and all that type of thing. So congrats to the United States junior hockey team. Canadians and the Red Wings. So I remember when Lalonde was let go in Detroit recently, the first game for Todd McLellan wasn't very good. They lost. But Todd McLellan was quoted as saying either after that game or before, he basically said, go out and play beep hockey. Just go and play hockey. Go and play the game. Don't think about it. Go and play the game. And now what are they doing? They're playing the game. It seems that vocal, the voice in what he said has helped the team, because now they're thinking, well, I'm not going to get pressured into this and this and this. Play the game. Because when you play the game relaxed, it's easy for us to say because we're not doing it. But when you play it more relaxed, results happen, and that's what we're seeing.
They've won 4 straight.
Yeah.
Have you seen Patrick Kane's numbers in those 4 games?
Yep, he looks good. Yep.
All of a sudden, Patrick Kane is looking like Patrick Kane again and putting up the numbers on the line with DeBrincat, which speaks really loudly. And it's no coincidence they've won 4 straight and Patrick Kane is scoring again.
Not at all. They go hand in hand.
Those two elements are very, there's a correlation there. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So it's interesting because, I mean, many of us have written off the Red Wings. And now if you're looking at them, okay, it's 4 straight. They're only 4 points behind Tampa for 4th spot in the Atlantic. Do they end up in contention down the stretch? I don't think so, but at least they're giving us something to talk about. And for Red Wings fans, I think that's a lot more fun than before they won 4 straight.
No, it is. Absolutely. And I give Todd McLellan credit already. I really do. And if this continues, great. If it doesn't, if they kind of plateau, which again, I don't think that they're going to make it in.
I think they're going to plateau as well, yes.
Yeah. For me and for Detroit, all the discussion about what Stevie Y has done or what he hasn't done and how much pressure that he's under or how much of the blame that he has to take because of where Detroit is and how they're playing. I think if you close out this season, take these 4 months, play as great hockey as you can, find a system under your new coach. Todd McLellan going to put his footprint in Detroit. And then if you don't make it in, take the positives, come back next season, do an off season where you can actually do something, because Stevie Y certainly should address things. And then I think we'll see the team take a jump next season. But we'll see. Speaking of jumps, Montreal. We've talked about Buffalo, Ottawa, and Detroit. Those 3 teams. Are they going to go? Are they going to not? Who's going to go? The Canadians, they're coming off wins against Florida. They won the Stanley Cup recently, last year. Right. Then they beat Tampa after that. Tampa's a former champion recently. They beat Vegas. Vegas, a former champion recently. And sprinkle in between that loss to Chicago, it doesn't matter. And then they beat the Colorado Avalanche, Vic, 2-1 in a shootout. They've beaten 4 Stanley Cup champions in the past 5 games. And the numbers aren't fantastic, but what they have 8 points against the last 4 Stanley Cup champions. That is so impressive.
Do you think that there's an element in here? I'm going to PP on this parade just a little bit.
Okay.
Do you think there's an element of the powerhouse teams that they faced taking a bit of a night off? Because you don't.
No, I don't.
You don't think that they took Montreal a little lightly? No? Okay.
No, I don't.
Just
I think
it
that
out there.
I think that it still is a thing. I don't think it's as much as a thing. I think nowadays it's coaches, if they do that against a bad team, what are you doing? A game's a game. You got to play, got to try to play to win the game. Thanks from Edwards. But I don't think so. And you know what? For the more I think about it, these came relatively in succession. Put Chicago in between, but the 4 wins came in succession. So say Vegas or Colorado, that they saw the Canadians beat the Panthers. They saw them beat Tampa. They knew they beat Vegas. They would absolutely think, okay, hold on a second here. We can't take this team. So no, long-winded answer. I don't think so.
Okay. And two big thumbs up to their rookie netminder, 23-year-old, who came in and
you see him in the shootout against Colorado? As smooth as butter.
Yes. His save percentage right now is ridiculous. His goals against average. Of course, it's going to level out, but he's probably going to probably play either the Capitals or the Dallas Stars this week because the Canadians have a back-to-back a little bit further on in the week. And we'll see. But roll with him while he's hot. He doesn't know how to lose yet. So you go with the kid who doesn't know. Okay, it's only 2 NHL starts under his socks, but it's you roll with him until he flounders. That's my philosophy.
This reminds me early about Sheloff's when he did his thing last year in Vancouver.
Very similar.
Yeah. And Sam Montembeault, he's the third goalie on Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Alex Ovechkin. He's going to break the record. He's going to do it this season.
Alex Ovechkin, Ryan. 5 games, 4 goals.
23 away from breaking, 22 away from tying. So Gretzky, of course, 894. Ovi's at 872. He has to do it, Vic. I mean, all signs are pointing to that he's going to do it by the time the season's
He might do it by mid-February.
He might do it next week.
Right. At this pace, it's fun. Of course, we all know that you're talking about plateauing. He's going to hit a stretch where he's not going to find the back of the net. It doesn't feel like that's coming anytime soon. But you know that we are in for that. And everybody's going to up in arms. Oh my goodness, he's not going to do it again. He's not going to do it. No, it'll be early next season. But I do think, I thought that he would do it earlier this season. Then he got hurt, missed a whole bunch of time. Then I started to waver on it, but it's still Ovechkin. It's one of the game's fiercest competitors for the past 2 decades.
Yeah.
You know, first ballot Hall of Famer, there's absolutely no discussion. But he wants to win every single game. And the fact that he's doing this, he's scoring when the Capitals are winning, I think just makes it more of a joyful experience for him, for everybody else involved. It's they're a very smiley team right now. And I wasn't buying in earlier in the season. I'll be the first to admit it.
Oh, you got to buy in now.
Oh, I am now. I think coaching has a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the emergence of some of the younger players like Protas and the way that Pierre-Luc Dubois has fit in so much better than so many of us anticipated. And the goaltending, particularly Logan Thompson, they're just running with it right now. And you can't rule them out. I'm not talking about the postseason. I'm talking about them winning the Metropolitan.
Right.
Like they could finish top of that division. And that is not a conversation anybody had before this season started.
Is Logan Thompson on the Canadian team?
You know the answer to that.
2 things about that. Number 1, Spencer Carberry, for me, Coach of the Year.
He is right now. Yeah.
He did something on Friday during practice. So last Friday, a few days ago, before the weekend. He juggled his lines. So what coach would juggle their lines when you're playing this well? He said he wasn't too happy with a few things, so he decided to. That to me is coaching. Things are going well, and you're still trying to improve, and he juggled some, and they're continuing to do well. I'm going to throw this out to you, and this to me is astonishing. I didn't realize this till I saw this today. Ovechkin has 19 goals in 23 games. So he's 22 away from tying, 23 away from breaking.
Bananas.
That's a pace of 0.826. So almost a goal a game, 0.826 per game. If he continues this pace, and to your point, he may hit a bit of a dip, but he'll get back. He'll tie the record in 1,476 games. 3 less than Gretzky. Ovechkin, how many lockouts has he had to go through? He had to go through COVID. That is ridiculous. You put that into perspective. That despite all the games that he's missed, not because of injury, but because of everything else, he could still beat Gretzky in 3 less games.
It'll be discussed. There's no question of that. I don't think he will do this, by the way, but it's interesting that it's even a topic of conversation right now.
Mark Messier was on TNT recently, and he was addressing the state of the Rangers. And he said the Rangers are a fractured club. They're a fractured team. I think everybody would agree with this. Yes, they're coming off a big win against Chicago. It's only big because they don't win anymore. It's against a terrible team. When the Columbus Blue Jackets, and to your point, you have this on the lineup, when the Blue Jackets are higher in the standings than the Rangers in the Eastern Conference, wow.
Now, credit to the Blue Jackets. Let's not take anything away from what they're accomplishing, because they do have a good young hockey club with some no-name players to casual fans outside of Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
Voronkov is one. Marchenko is another. These are not players that you're discussing around the dinner table if you live in, say, St. Louis or Anaheim, right? So it's and the fact that they're accomplishing what they've accomplished so far with such a lousy road record too. If Columbus can figure out how to win away from home, then they could be in this discussion as well. The Detroit type of discussion, the Montreal type of discussion. Are they going to be one of those teams that can steal a spot? But then we are conceding, Ryan, that the Rangers aren't going to turn things around. Do you believe they will not? Or do you still think that there's a glimmer of hope that NYR is going to figure it out before it's too late?
I think that they are not going to do it. If you want to look at the standings at this point, and again, there's a lot of track to go. We have basically January through the season. Right. So we're halfway through. In the wild card, the Rangers are 8th. The only 2 teams behind them are the Islanders and the Sabres, who are not going to go anywhere either. Divisionally speaking, the Rangers are 7th. And every time this happens, when you look at a team and question whether they can move up, not only is it about points, but the teams that they can overcome.
Of course.
I think Pittsburgh is going to just maintain just kind of doing what they're doing. I don't see the top 3 changing with Washington, New Jersey, and Carolina. They may flip-flop.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I don't think so. Based on that, then you've got the wild card teams. The Rangers, Vic, need to go on a run. They need to go on a huge run, and it has to start this month. Because if they're in any position where they're looking at selling by the deadline, I mean, they've already dealt some guys already. That's going to be they're not making the playoffs. I'm going to put a stamp on it right now.
Okay, they have 2 games in hand on the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are now currently in 4th spot in the Metropolitan.
Right.
They are 4 points back. One little streak, and they have, this is why I'm being so stubborn about this. Right. They have the personnel to do it. It's not like we're talking about a roster that resembles...
But listen, I get it, and I get it with numbers and stats, but I don't think mentally the personnel is on the same page. I don't think they care right now. I really don't. So based on that, no, they don't have the personnel.
What if they figure it out, though? I know. I'm being completely stubborn about it. I understand that.
Totally get it. And stranger things have happened. So
St. Louis Blues a few years back, right?
I know.
How did that turn out? So, and it was about this time in the season that they completely flipped the script and went on to eventually hoist the Stanley Cup. I'm not saying the Rangers are going to win the Stanley Cup. Right, I'm just talking postseason, and I am not ready to write them off quite yet. We will reconvene on this topic in 2 to 3 weeks' time, and I may have changed my mind depending on what happens between now and then. But right this very minute, I'm not quite ready, and I know a lot of people, not just you, disagree with me, but I'm not quite ready yet. We'll see.
Okay. Are we quite ready? Yes, we've been ready since they came into the league a number of years ago to crown the Vegas Golden Knights as not just the best team in the West, but are they the best team in the league right now?
Well, they are. Numerically, they are. They are the best team in the league right now. And if you you look at how they're winning games, a few losses here and there, of course, nobody's perfect, but how they're winning games. And if you look at their strengths versus their weaknesses, there just are no flaws.
They don't have any weaknesses. Roster. They don't have any weakness.
Great defensive core. They're getting excellent goaltending from 2 people, which is key. All right. They've got the star power with Jack Eichel and Mark Stone. Mark Stone has to stay healthy. Oh my goodness. Fingers crossed, like from now until spring. Mark Stone stays healthy. They're getting depth scoring. So when one player isn't getting it done, somebody else is stepping up, and not necessarily the players you would expect every single night. They're very well coached. They're such a tough out every single night that if you just, I don't know who's better. Who would you argue is better? The Devils? The Maple Leafs? Not to me. No. Winnipeg? Maybe Winnipeg? Maybe.
Yeah, but even, I'm going to throw this at you then. If you take Winnipeg and Vegas in a 7-game series right now that starts tonight, who would you pick?
It would be Vegas.
Exactly.
I would pick Vegas in 6.
Yeah.
And because, Hellebuck's going to steal 1 at least, right? So it's not going to be a sweep. But again, lining those 2 teams up, I'm going to take Vegas. I have Vegas as my Stanley Cup pick today. I didn't before the season starts. I'm not going to be silly. But today, if you're asking me you give me $10 and I have to lay it down on a team in the NHL to win the Cup right now, it's the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, it's impressive. I think they have 15 or 16 players in double digits in scoring.
Depth scoring, Ryan. Depth scoring.
Yeah, in December, I think it was a 1.9 something goals against that they were giving up for the whole month. And they've only lost 3 times since the end of November in regulation. It's ridiculous. Every year they're doing this.
Isn't getting it done. Ilya Samsonov is. Right? So they can turn to whoever every night. And I'm going to give full credit to the defensive core out in front of them, because that's a big reason those goaltenders are performing well. But it's a team effort. It's a team sport, right?
I think based on, and we say Vegas is the best team right now, I think that's the best defensive core in the league. Do you agree?
I can't argue that. No.
Okay.
I can't argue that.
Good. We don't argue that much. We'll argue at some point.
Except the Rangers are going to make the playoffs.
Don't even stop. Okay, so from Vegas to Dallas, and we have on the lineup here, the Stars are shining. And yes, they're playing well. They're still doing what they're doing. They're still doing Dallas things. They've won 4 in a row. They've had points in 6 consecutive, which is great for any team. But I just look at the strength of the schedule, and I hate that, but I know you love it, but in this case, I'm going to talk about it. They beat Chicago 5-1. Then you beat Buffalo 4-2, which is great. Yeah. A team like Dallas should. Then you beat Ottawa 4-2. That's a tough game. Ottawa's been playing pretty well, and they're really tough opponents.
Yeah, no Ullmark, though. No Ullmark. So
and then you beat,
not quite the same competition.
And then you beat Utah in overtime 3-2. You got the Rangers coming up Tuesday, which is tomorrow. Then the Flyers Thursday. Those are winnable games, and then Montreal on Saturday. I just don't want people to get too far ahead of themselves based on the wins that they've had and who they've come against in the last few.
So you're going to criticize them for beating the teams that they should beat?
Yes,
is that
absolutely.
The criticism? Okay. Just making sure. I do like the fact, though, that we haven't talked about the Stars a lot this season. And I.
And I don't think many people do, because they just, as I said, they do Dallas things.
They hang around and they win some quietly. Games.
Jake Oettinger doing this. Right? Oh yeah, Jamie Benn, Rupe Hintz.
Rupe Hintz is actually scoring again. So is Jason phenomenal. Robertson. And I think that's a really, really big deal. And they're doing it. Tyler Seguin, who had a really good start to the season, is hurt, and he's going to be out a while. Now Mason Marchment is hurt, and they're still winning hockey games. To me, this is a team that enjoys so much more success. Yeah. And this is no great insight when Jamie Benn is going. Right. When Jamie Benn is going, that team is going. And he's just one of the premier power forwards in the West, and has been for years and years and years. And when he has it all together, which he does right now, you can put him on with any line mate. And he's so tough to play against. We talk about the scoring, and that's it, the goal scoring league. You win games by scoring goals. But everything else that he does, he's one of the more difficult forwards to play against. And he's proving that right now. So when Jamie Benn is going, this team is going. It's just, they're one of those, because we've given so much attention to Winnipeg, and for good reason.
Of course.
Especially after their start. And then Colorado is playing better now, very impressively. And Dallas just sort of hangs around. Yeah. Wins games, right? And at the end of the season, we'd be like, "Oh, they're in second or first. How did that happen?" Right?
I'll tell you who's key. The key to, and Ben is a key, obviously, and Wyatt Johnston and all these great players, older or younger, that they have. But the key is in goal. The key is Jake Oettinger. Yep. Jake Oettinger is tied for second with wins, with 19. I didn't think that. Hellebuck's up there with 24.
I wouldn't have got that right.
Yeah, but 19 wins, tied with Jacob Markstrom. He has a .910 save percentage, .235 goals against average.
That's really good. .910 is but the goals against average is very good.
And he has a point. He has a point this year. There we go. Has an assist. Anyway, you know, Philip Gustafsson has 2, a goal and an assist.
Yeah. That's more than, remember the goalie goal. Yeah. Everybody celebrates the goalie goal.
That's more than some players on the Rangers.
Quite a few.
Last one. Before we talk to Randy about her new book, are we seeing the separation? And you and I talked about this yesterday when we were just looking at different things to discuss. But some of the divisions are going about the way that we thought they would, and I think there's no better
example
of this than in the Pacific.
It's true. There's a separation now with the Vegas Golden Knights, the Kings, and the Oilers. And I think many of us had those 3 atop of the division Not everybody, but
Right.
a lot of us did. Maybe not necessarily in that order. I didn't have it in that order. I thought the Oilers would be on top by this point, then Vegas, then the Kings. And that's not the order right now.
Right.
But then everybody goes, what about the Canucks? What about the Canucks after the success that they had enjoyed recently? They should be in that mix as well. And there's separation now. If I'm doing my math properly, there's 7 points separating the Oilers and the Canucks between third and fourth. And the Oilers have played one more game, but still, that's just one more game. And now the mess that the Canucks seem to be in, soap opera wise, I don't think is helping them very much. I don't even know if the issue with Pettersson and JT Miller is the bigger issue or the discussion surrounding it is the bigger issue. Well, I truly believe that two grown-ups can get along if they're professionals and it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, but it's
right.
No, that's
but we're
true.
talking about it every second.
Yeah, but it's known that they don't like each other. And so from what I gather, they both have told each other, we don't like each other. Like, I don't like you. Well, okay, I don't like you.
Haven't you worked with people you don't like? I have.
Absolutely.
And I know I've worked with people who haven't been big fans of me. Not too many. I'm relatively popular. But
look what I've done with you in the last 3 years.
Yeah,
it's not easy.
It work.
It's not easy.
We managed to pull it off.
We did.
Jokes aside.
I agree.
Just you put on your pants and you go to work and get the job done. And there have been plenty of sports teams in the past, not just hockey, baseball, football, basketball, soccer, where people have not necessarily got along and still got the job done. Now, I understand that there's a chemistry element in hockey that doesn't necessarily exist in baseball, right? You can be a pitcher and an outfielder. You cannot stand each other and who cares?
Right.
But there's still, you can still get it done because you know what both of them want? To win.
Yeah.
So figure out how to win. And this talk about trading JT Miller and he's going to go back to the Rangers. And I don't know, maybe it happens. But what's Vancouver getting back to replace JT Miller? And I know he hasn't had the best season. And I know he took the time off.
Yeah.
He's still JT Miller, man. Sorry, Ryan. I want him on my hockey team.
No, I agree.
Right?
Yeah. He is one of the players. I mean, he's not up there with, say, like a Brad Marchand that you hate to play against, you want to have on your team, but he's close. You want to have him in a 7-game series, for example. You want to have somebody like that.
Oh, yes. I want JT Miller on my hockey team. Absolutely.
So Vegas, LA, and Edmonton, then we'll take a break. They've combined to win in their last 10 games. So that's last 30. They have 21 wins in the last 30. Vegas has won 2 in a row. Kings have won 4 in a row. Edmonton's won 3 in a row. So if that continues, again, the separation between Vancouver and then Edmonton and then the other two teams in that Pacific, it's going to just keep going like this. So I
wonder if 5 are going from the Central. Do you think about that?
I do. Winnipeg,
right?
Minnesota, Dallas, Colorado.
And?
Blues.
Maybe.
Right? Yeah, I absolutely would. Yeah, this is, I don't know. It's interesting. And again, we're only first week of January. By the way, Happy New Year if I forgot to say that already. I'm kidding. Okay, we'll take a break. Really excited to have our next guest coming up with us, and she'll do this. She'll join us after this. Randy Druzin. She is an author, and she is coming off a book, a great book called Behind the Mask, looking at 12 incredible goaltenders in hockey history. Among the names, Roberto Luongo, Marc-Andre Fleury, Tony Esposito, Vladislav Tretiak, Dominik Hasek. She has great stories about them all, and we'll get into that next. Pucks in 7, Ryan Payne, Victoria Matiash, Randy Druzin is coming up.
Welcome back to Pucks in 7 with Ryan Payton and Victoria Matiash.
All right, welcome back to Pucks in 7. She is an author, a journalist based in Toronto. She's worked at many major media outlets, the National Post, the CBC. She's written for dozens of publications, including the New York Times, Time Magazine. I can spend 25 minutes with Vic on just her resume, but we're not going to do that. We're going to talk about a book specifically that she did write. Her name is Randy Druzin. She joins us here to look at this book, Behind the Mask, which features profiles of 12 great goaltenders. Randy, how are you? Thanks for doing this.
I'm very good. Thanks for having me.
Where did this love of hockey come from? Where did this interest in goaltending come from? Because you've covered a lot of things in your lifetime and probably a lot more depressing things than goaltenders based on what you've done in your career. Where did this all start?
Well, my interest in hockey started when I was around 7 or 8 years old. And I think in most cases, women who have that experience say they had older brothers or
Yeah.
fathers who really encouraged them. I have two brothers. I have a father. None of them have even a remote interest in hockey. In fact, they don't read my books because that's how little they're
jeez.
interested.
That's awful. Awful,
But
Randy.
they're happy that I write them and they
Yeah.
brag
Right.
about
They
me,
just
but
don't.
they don't read them. Um, but I had a babysitter. My parents would go out for date night, every Saturday when I was a kid, and we had a babysitter come in, and she loved Hockey Night in Canada,
Yeah.
and I used to watch with her, and I became addicted. I was probably, 7, 8 years old, so I've loved it my whole life.
That's amazing. I love the fact that the catalyst for you loving the game was another woman as well, because
Yeah.
I think you and we're of a similar vintage, and
Yes.
I fell in love with it as well during, I think, probably the same period. And I wasn't much encouraged by the men with my family either. It was my
No.
grandmother. My grandmother got me
Oh,
into sports as well, and she was a big Bruins fan, and that's how and a Red Sox fan and a Patriots fan, and that's how I fell in love with sports in
yeah.
general, is because of her, which is a little bit of a different story. So I love that you have that as well. I want to get into
Yeah.
not only behind the mask, but also between the pipes, which you had written a decade earlier. So
Right.
you do. What is it about the goaltenders? Because you could have written hockey books about a certain player, a certain team, a certain era, but you looked at a
Yeah.
certain position. So why?
Well, this is the thing. Ryan kind of touched on it briefly, is that in my daily job when I'm working in international national news,
Yeah.
it's not fun. Like
No.
it's very serious. And I like to have fun with my writing. When I'm not at work, I like to have fun. And if you want to have fun, having to write about goaltenders is the best way to do it because they're such interesting characters. I
Mhm.
thought
They
if I'm
are.
going to be cheeky and irreverent, goaltenders are the way to go because they're so colorful. They lend themselves to colorful writing. So that's why I really enjoy writing about goaltenders. And they're just interesting, in my opinion. In general, they're more interesting than the other players on the team to
Yeah.
talk to and follow.
I would agree with that. I've spoken to a number of goalies over the years, and Vic and I have been in this business for a long time, and they're made differently.
They're different ducks.
You have to be a
Yes.
different you have to be a different individual to be a goaltender. I have the utmost respect for them.
Oh, yeah.
I remember.
Oh, I can't do that job.
Oh no.
Are you serious?
And
No
they
way.
go through, and again, we're gonna get into the goalies that you do mention in this book. They go through these certain routines, and I remember recently Braden Holtby, when he was playing for Washington, one of the better goalies, and he certainly had a great time with the Capitals. One of his pregame routines was, and even during the intermission or the whistle, he'd take the water bottle behind the net, he'd shoot it up, and he'd just watch the trickles come down with his eyes, boom, 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 to try to get used to the puck maybe coming at him. So I find it fascinating. Yeah, I find it fascinating. There was one goalie who you didn't focus in on, but who's one of the greatest of all time. And he said this quote, Jacques Plante. He said, "How would you like a job where every time you make a mistake, a big red light goes on and 18,000 people boo?" That makes so much sense, Randy, if it comes to goaltending. It's a great job, but then if you let one in, it's not so good.
But you did cover Jacques Plante, and I want to ask you something about that.
Not in the second book, but in the first one.
Yeah.
It's funny because if you go to the Amazon page, someone's written, "I'm giving this 1 star because Terry Sawchuk's not in it." And I'm like,
right.
He was in the last book, and there's nothing I can do about it.
No, you
There
can't.
is nothing I can do. I can't say, "Hey, idiot, this was in the last book." I can't say anything. I just have to leave it there.
Yeah.
And hope other people don't do the same. But Jacques Plante was in the first book. The first book focused primarily on original 6 goalies.
Yeah.
And then I think the most current goalie, it ended with Martin Brodeur, who was still playing at the time I wrote that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like 10 years ago or so. The current book is more contemporary goalies. So I think the demographic of readership is probably a little younger in this one.
I want to ask you about Jacques Plante specifically, though. Why won't he stay at the Royal York Hotel when he visits Toronto?
You know what? In fairness to me, I wrote it 10 years ago. I don't remember.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I do remember that the entire team stayed there, but he refused. And it became an issue. It became a sticking point. But because he was Jacques Plante, they made all sorts of allowances for him.
Right.
Because he was Jacques Plante and they needed him. I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember the exact reason.
No, we'll look it up and we'll
I do
fill in
know
the blanks
he
later.
stay there. I remember because I was writing it thinking, why wouldn't he want to stay at the Royal York? It's such a great
nice
hotel.
Yeah.
Again,
what's he going to do? Stay at the Holiday Inn? No,
yeah.
he's off plan.
Goalies have their reasons. Some of the goalies you do profile in this book, Jerry Cheevers, Tony Esposito, Vladislav Tretiak, we'll get to them in a second. Marc-Andre Fleury, I can speak for Vic on this. He is one of my favorite goalies of all time.
I adore him.
Such a personality. He's just as good on the ice, maybe even better off the ice as a human as he is on the ice. Is he as nice as he seems to be? Because it seems to us that he is.
Yeah, absolutely. I was expecting, to be a little disillusioned when I spoke to him, because sometimes, famous people aren't what you expect them to be or hope they will be.
Yeah.
In his case, he was exactly what you would expect. He was really friendly, really nice. And I have to tell you, the interview was the most challenging one I did for technological reasons.
Okay.
I was on his cell phone with him, and he was in the GM's office, I think, of his club, and the line kept getting dropped.
Oh.
So, it was like I'd ask him the same question 2 or 3 or 4 times because I couldn't hear his answer. And he was really good natured about it. He was laughing. He was like, if the call gets dropped entirely, I'll call you back. No problem.
That's terrific.
It was a challenging interview, but only for technological reasons.
Yeah.
And I wish that hadn't happened, because I had a lot more questions I would have
to
ask him. Yeah. But I did get some good answers, and he was really good natured, very nice person. And I think the fact that his backup goalies have nothing but good things to say about him.
Right. It does. Good point.
Yeah.
On the personality wave, is Carey Price as chill as he seems to be?
I have to tell you, he wouldn't talk to me.
He wouldn't?
No, he would not talk to me. I tried every imaginable way to get to him. But he was going through that tough, very tough time in Montreal. Because he was off. No one knew if he was coming back. And I think he just didn't want to talk to anyone at the time. So it was bad timing for me. Okay. But I did speak to quite a few of his teammates, former teammates, and, other people in his life. So I got a pretty good sense of what he's like off the ice. And I think he's pretty much the same way. Whatever's going on inside, you're not going to see it on the outside, right? Because he's very stoic.
I've always said this about him, that he is one of the calmest goalies I've ever seen play. And when he's at his best, I know he's not playing now, he's had issues, but when he's at his best, he goes side to side so smoothly and very slowly, but yet it's quick, and he's always in position. Yes. You can light a fire under his foot and he'll say, "Oh, that hurts. That's a bit of a burn. That's hot." Right? And then now what do we do after that?
I think one of his teammates said to me that he doesn't think Carey Price's heart rate ever goes above 60.
No,
which is great for a goaltender.
Right.
If I was in there, I'd probably have a heart attack. And
I couldn't.
Yeah, the blood pressure would not be good.
Seconds.
It would not be good. Some of the great goalies of all time, Randy, not just, of course, in North America, but also overseas. Vladislav Tretiak, he really doesn't need any introduction. The 1972 Summit Series against Canada, one of the biggest ones for him and also the countries back then, the USSR. How close was he to becoming a Canadian?
This is my favorite question.
Yeah, he was very close. He was drafted. The Montreal Canadiens were so impressed with what they saw in that series and in other international competitions that they drafted him. Yeah. And he got clearance from the Soviet government, and it was the Soviet government at that time, to play in the NHL. And then mysteriously they changed their minds, and he never made it here. But imagine what he would have done in the NHL.
What a wasted opportunity.
Yeah.
It
so
really
he wanted to come.
Oh yeah.
And it was the Soviets that stopped it. I wasn't entirely sure about that.
Yeah, and I think they gave some excuse like, well, his father's in the military, so we can't afford to let him go. But no one really knows. We may never know what happened, but he was lined up to come here to play for the Canadiens, and just never happened.
Imagine how hockey history would have been different.
Oh yeah, right? I think there's no doubt in my mind he would have been like one of the best goalies in NHL history.
That's very, very hard to argue.
We saw him against NHL players internationally. Our best. They laughed when they saw him walk on the ice with his old equipment, his crappy little helmet, and he showed them, right? So he would have been great.
Somebody who did play a long time, never won a cup, but played a long time in the NHL. You refer to Henrik Lundqvist as a class act.
Yeah.
Why is he such a class? We all think so, but why?
He's a class act in 2 ways. I think in one way, he's really a class act in the sense that he's so involved with charity and charitable initiatives. People don't really think about that when they think of Lundqvist, but he's very involved in raising money for good causes. And I think that's a classy thing to do.
It sure is.
And then, of course, everyone looks at Henrik Lundqvist and he's wearing those amazing suits,
Oh,
and he's traveling
I'm
to,
envious, Randy. I'm
I
envious.
know, Fashion Week in Milan,
Yeah.
and I did speak to one of his former teammates who said, Pat, Henrik had taken him aside and given him some tips about how to wear a suit properly.
Right.
So, yeah, and then I also found out that I think they went to the Czech Republic for exhibition game one season. There was a sporting goods company that sponsored the team and required all the players to wear, their clothing into the arena. Lundqvist did it the first time, not so good. Second time, he's like, no, and he shows up in a three-piece suit when all his teammates are in the
Of course he did.
sporting goods tracksuits,
Right,
so
right.
he does his own thing, and he's classy in many ways. And he's also, when I was speaking to him, he's very gracious and very professional.
Oh, nice.
And when I spoke to him, he said he'd put me in touch with one of his former teammates, and I thought I'd never hear from him again. But then, the next morning, he's like, okay, here's a name, here's a number, there you go. So I thought that was classy as well.
You see, stuff like that just
I like those stories.
makes me happy, because there's a lot of times people's perception of athletes, retired, playing, current, whatever it is, they don't have time for anything else or anybody else. But the fact is he does. And like Marc-Andre Fleury, he comes across as a great human, and he obviously is a great human being, as you found out. We're talking to Randy Druzin.
To be a little plastic, he's also not unattractive, just in general.
No.
I won't argue with that. I have to say, when I have a lot of female friends who have zero interest in hockey, but a lot of interest in my conversation with Henrik Lundqvist.
They're Lundqvist fans regardless? Yeah, I can understand that.
Randy's next book, The Most Attractive Goaltender of All Time.
No, instead of the greatest, it'd be like the hottest.
The hottest.
It'll sell.
Yeah, not behind the mask, outside the mask.
Right?
There we go.
Yeah.
We're talking to Randy Druzin, author of Behind the Mask, a revealing look at 12 of the greatest goalies in hockey history. We mentioned off the top of this that goalies are a different breed. How quirky was Dominik Hasek?
Oh, he was, you know what? He, to read about him and to talk to people about him, he was incredibly quirky. But when I actually sat down and had a conversation with him, he wasn't quirky at all. He was very intelligent, very thoughtful. He was giving me answers that he was not on autopilot, like a lot of athletes are when they speak to you. And we ended up speaking about everything from hockey to the European Union, the Euro, Czech history. He is a very intelligent, thoughtful person who was a very interesting person to interview. And especially, I interviewed him in the lobby of a hotel, and there was a drunk couple that sort of approached us while I was doing the interview. And he was just, you can see it's not the first time it happened to him.
Right.
A woman came up to him and said, "Oh, you're Dominik Hasek." And he's like, "Yes, that is true." And then I think the guy asked him to play in his beer league. Right?
Of course he did.
Awesome.
We need a goalie Sunday morning, and it'd be great to have a multiple Vezina trophy winner in net for us. So
Roberto Luongo has done that. You wrote about Roberto Luongo as well, and he actually did that. This is the best segue ever.
Yeah, that was good.
He's really fun, and Roberto Luongo seems to be one of the more personable goalies. And we're not going to expose all the stories from your book, because everybody should read the book because it's a great book.
Yeah.
But what's something that stuck out for you about him in particular?
Well, I don't know how to approach this delicately, but there's a part of the chapter on him about his gastric disaster during the playoffs, right? Where he didn't show up for overtime, and everyone was wondering, oh my God, there was gasps, in the audience. Why is Luongo not coming out for the overtime?
Bad timing.
He's just human, and he had too much coffee, that afternoon, so he was sort of stuck. He was indisposed,
right?
And, he spoke about that quite openly. And then I think he went back a few years later and took a picture of the crime scene.
Oh, really?
So, yes, he did.
I didn't know that.
I think he posted it on social media, which is one of the things people love about him, is his social media presence.
Yes, his Strombone account was a lot of fun when it was active.
And for a long time, people didn't know it was him. They were just guessing.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, until he's like, okay, it's me. And people just completely warmed up to him, even more so after that, because of his sense of humor and self-deprecating humor.
Well, who amongst us haven't been in a situation,
right? Of course.
Yeah.
So it just humanizes them.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. Like, and he spoke about it in very graphic terms, which I thought Thanks for that.
Yes. You maybe didn't need all that information.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I need pictorials necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. But he's like, all the goalies are very interesting. There's not a dull goalie in this book or the last one, and that
Right.
just, again, it, shows you why I like writing about them so much.
The 12 goalies that you wrote in this book, you wrote about some original six goalies in the last one too, a number of years ago. But the 12 that you wrote, did anyone surprise you the most, or did most of them meet your expectations?
I think most of them met my expectations. They were all very, in terms of my research or in terms of my conversations with them.
All of it.
All of it.
None of them were really surprising. Like, I heard Marc-Andre Fleury was a great guy.
Yeah.
He was. I heard Henrik Lundqvist was a class act. He was. So no, none of it surprised me. Jerry Cheevers wasn't outlandish, which I was kind of hoping he might be,
Right.
Okay.
based on what I'd read about him.
His mask was outlandish, right? All the scars that he had on the...
Yeah. And he
Right.
was a joker.
Yeah.
He was often seen in the dressing room, smoking a cigar
Yeah.
Right.
and reading the racing papers, the racing forms, because he was really into horse racing, and he owned a horse. I think he had two at one point. So, he was just a character. He was a really interesting guy to talk to as well, but not outlandish. I was kind of hoping for something crazy, but there was nothing like that. He was just a, very intelligent, pleasant man to speak to.
Interesting.
It's kind of disappointing a little bit.
I know. I was
A
like, give me
reasonably
something.
intelligent, nice person.
Yes. Like, oh, ho hum. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Right. You also, you're not only the author of 2 books about goaltenders, but you also wrote a book about Reggie Leach.
Yeah,
And-
I worked with him on his autobiography. So
Yes.
I
Riverton
had to
Rifle.
write the book in Reggie's voice, which was not my voice. So that was challenging.
I can imagine, what was maybe one of your more favorite stories to come out from him about his life and because what a life. So
Yeah.
what's something that you enjoyed tackling in his book in particular?
What really struck me about him, aside from the fact that he's such a nice man, like he's up there with Marc-Andre Fleury as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
It's just that he really hit rock bottom. Like he'll tell you he had a drinking problem at one
Yes.
point.
Yeah.
And he hit rock bottom at a certain point, just couldn't play in the league anymore. Just, he wasn't functional. And after that, he started drinking even more after he left the league. And he got into the hospital. The doctor said, listen, you either stop drinking or you're going to be dead in a few months.
Oh boy.
So he hit rock bottom. And you know what? He hasn't had a drink since.
Good for him.
And he ended up starting a very lucrative landscaping business. So he did really well for himself. And now, he's a pillar of the Indigenous community.
Yes.
He travels around, very involved in different initiatives with his wife. And I think the thing that struck me was the trajectory of his life, how he got really hit rock bottom and then just pulled himself up and is now doing really well and hasn't had a drink in decades.
Another amazing story that you like to hear from that based on where he was. I wanted to ask you this earlier, ask you now, and then Vic we can go into the Women in Sports book also that you wrote quickly. The whole process of getting these interviews and talking to these goaltenders, how does that start? What do you have to go through to start the process, and in order for it to get completed when you actually speak to these guys?
You mean, how do I land the interviews?
Yeah. Like what's the process like?
I kind of think as the goalie is like the center of the dartboard, and I just work around the edges. Like maybe I speak to a trainer and then I speak to a former player, and then I end up
you eventually
speaking
get
to someone. I eventually get there because it usually happens through the course of my interviewing. I'll interview former teammates and trainers and coaches. And then at some point, one of them will say, yeah, I just spoke to him yesterday or something. And I'll say, oh, do you think it'd be okay if I got in touch with him?
Neat.
And that's usually how it works, because I find there's some PR people at clubs that are more helpful than others.
Sure.
Oh yes.
So
Why did I know about that?
Well.
Oh yeah.
Some will do everything to accommodate and help, and others you can't get a return email or phone call from them.
Yeah.
So it really depends on the club.
Interesting.
That is that's true. You also you got me thinking about some PR people right now, so I'm completely distracted.
Stay
Actually,
focused. Stay focused.
there was one arena I got lost in, and they wouldn't help me at all, and that was just like anyway. It was quite an adventure. Not going to name any names. You also are a big proponent of women's sports.
Yes.
Again, Who Amongst Us or Not.
Mhm.
And you wrote The Idiot's Guide to Women's Sports, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
Give us, again, people should just take this out of the library or pick it up at your local bookstore, especially if it's a private bookstore, say Book City in Toronto, wherever you are. What's one anecdote that, again, you relished, you enjoyed, surprised you when you were tackling Idiot's Guide to Women's Sports?
Oh my God, there were so many interesting.
Yeah, I figured.
If you go through history, like ancient Greece and the Middle Ages, like you're like, what? You did what? And I know in Victorian England or even Victoria time in that era, everywhere, they thought women shouldn't really exert themselves because
Right.
it might ruin their reproductive
Mhm.
organs. They wouldn't play
delicate.
volleyball. They shouldn't go bike riding. They didn't want them to run more than 800 meters at the Olympics because they thought they were too frail to do that. So that, this age, looking back at that, it seems absurd, but that's really the way it was. And but because I'm such a huge hockey fan, I remember working on that chapter, writing about Abby Hoffman.
Yes.
Do you know the story about Abby Hoffman?
No, go ahead.
Well, she ended up being an Olympian and an ambassador for the sport, like very involved. But she started off as a young kid who really wanted to play hockey, and this was long before either any of us were around.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And there were no girls' leagues, none at all. So she cut her hair and went by Ab, right? So they didn't know she was a girl
Oh boy.
until and she was an all-star. She was one of the best in the league. And I think she had to produce her birth certificate for a tournament of some sort. And that's when the jig was up, But she was a great defense. I think it was defenseman.
Mhm.
Defensewoman or girl, as the case
Defender
a defender, and she was one of the best in the league. No one had any idea that she was a girl, which I could say the same about myself. When I was a kid, people used to call me son.
Right.
So she's not alone in that regard.
It's wild, just the opportunities now, the difference between now.
Yes.
I played as a young teen in the
Yeah.
MGHL, the Mississauga Girls Hockey League, which was one of the first opportunities. If I lived in a different city at that age, I wasn't playing hockey. There was an opportunity there. Actually, Cheryl Pounder was a big star in our league at the time. And
I think I played a little bit before you.
Okay.
And there were so few females in my area that played that literally in my first team, I was on the ice. I was 9 years old. I was on the ice with 16-year-olds.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who are literally twice my size.
Right.
We had that. We had about 3 years. So you could be like 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
It wasn't, but that's a huge gap. My
Huge
goodness.
difference. Imagine a 16-year-old and a 9-year-old in the same line.
Yeah.
Wow.
Needless to say, I did not score a lot of goals that season.
Right. Just trying to stay alive.
Right.
Vic and I have, we've talked so much about women's sports, and I've been a huge proponent of it, and it's taken way too long. And the fact that it's now where it's at is great, but it should have happened years ago when you were just talking.
Yeah, but we can relish it now.
Of course we can.
Support the PWHL and the Women's Basketball League and all of it now. We can push it hard. Finally, though. Ryan, you're totally right, but finally we can.
When you just mentioned about Abby Hoffman, I was remembering in 1967, completely not hockey related, but a woman by the name of Catherine Switzer ran the Boston Marathon.
Yes.
And she entered in Kate Switzer, first woman, and the organizer about halfway through the race saw this woman running, came off the TV truck, ran after her. He was tackled or pushed aside by her then boyfriend, and her then boyfriend said to her, "I don't care what you do, you finish this race." That just gives me chills. And I spoke to her. I was lucky enough to speak to her a couple of years ago, and just fascinated to see where things have come.
That's a famous photo too. I see that photo. Actually, she's in the book as well in the track and field section of long distance running. Yeah, stories like that are amazing.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you can't run 800 meters, you might faint. Well, guess what? You can run longer than that.
Right.
And that wasn't that long ago. We're not talking Victorian England.
I know.
No.
Right?
I know.
That was the last time the Leafs won the cup. It's a long time ago.
That's a whole different conversation. But I am feeling
encouraged.
Yeah.
I'm feeling encouraged right now about the Leafs.
Me too. Yes, we are. We'll hold that.
They're getting production from their not just from the core four, so I think that's a positive development.
And
the Domi line right now with Robertson and McMahon is working really well. Everything is
McMahon's really impressed me. And Nyes, the game on the weekend, that backhander is like.
Did you like the 5 points? Were 5 points okay? A hat trick and 5 points all right? Somebody likes Austin Matthews back in the lineup, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious
They're
me.
a different looking team under
Yes.
Craig Berube. Randy, before we get to 77 seconds with you, what's next for you? More books?
Another goalie book, I hope.
Yeah, goalie book. And
I'd love to, but can I do another 12 goalies? At a certain
Yes.
point, I'm getting
Sure.
down to like, AHL goalies and things
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
But you know what? People saying, "What's your next project?" It's like asking a woman who's just given birth, like, "When are you going to get pregnant again?"
Right.
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 Right now, I'm not in the mood. I just want to just relax for 6 or 7 months,
Sure.
focus on promotions, and then start thinking about it.
Sure.
But I don't want to wait another 10 years.
Right.
I want to start something relatively soon. If you have any ideas, let me know. Something that would lend itself to colorful writing, because that's the kind of writing I like to do. I like to have fun.
Okay.
That's what makes the book more of an interesting.
Vic's wheels are turning
yeah,
already.
I'm already.
Yeah.
I'm
Now
already,
I'm starting to think. Now I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I do have some. I do have some.
Workshopping it. So
yeah, I'm workshopping it in my brain. That's what I'm doing.
Right. All right. So now, Randy, we're at the segment that we like to call 77 seconds. Again, it's not strict, but we have 7 questions. This is just fun, but quick fire answers. Elaborate a little bit, but the idea is to keep it within 77 seconds. I think one guest has done it once out of maybe 20. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
No pressure. All right. Not greatest, because that's an objective question, but your favorite goalie of all time?
Dominik Hasek.
Nice.
Because I lived in the Czech Republic when he was at the height of his powers. So I was there for the Nagano games. I was in Prague.
Cool.
When the Czechs beat the Canadians in Nagano.
I remember that.
You had to be excited about Hasek in that tournament. His goals against average was under 1.
Did you happen? This isn't in the questions, but did you happen to? Yeah. So now the 77 seconds is gone. It's forget it.
I've lost. I don't like losing. I want to beat this other person.
Okay. So I'll ask you. Who wins the Vezina Trophy this year?
Ooh. I'll end up being embarrassed. I'll have egg on my face, in June. But I would say Hallebuck.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're gonna have egg on your face at all. That's my pick.
That's a good guess.
Yeah.
Do the Leafs win the cup in our lifetime?
How old are you? I would say definitely maybe.
Okay.
Oh, Randy. Oh boy.
I'm optimistic. Listen, I've been suffering along with millions of other Leafs fans.
Yeah.
But I've learned the hard way not to say this is our year. I'm not going to say that.
No, well said. We've been trained, unfortunately, well.
Yeah.
Most interesting non-sports interview that you've done.
Oh, who I interviewed? Ozzy Osbourne's wife, Sharon Osbourne.
Okay. Okay. That must have been interesting.
The way she was describing Ozzy, I just thought, are we talking about the same person? Like she was saying how sweet he is, and he just
heard that about him.
Flowers at the airport, and I just thought, what? This is the guy who bites off bats' heads on stage.
Hey,
like
Randy,
I can't see it, but
never judge a book by its cover.
Absolutely.
Right? There you go.
So there you go,
nice.
Ozzy, like is the sweetest guy on earth.
Interesting.
What do you miss most about Prague?
Oh, everything. Like the Baroque architecture, just being in the center of Europe and being able to go to different country every weekend. I think mostly I miss my friends there, because I lived there for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends, other expats who are expats with me at the time who settled down there. And so they're living there, Scottish, Australian, American. I went there in the spring to visit them and to see Prague again. And it's really, really changed since I lived there.
That's one place I'd love to go. And hopefully I'll get there at one point.
You have to go. It's great.
How close were you to having David Lee Roth as a prom date?
Not close enough.
I loved that. I loved that article you wrote. That was great.
So I did invite him to my, my formal, and all I got was a Roth and roll button in response. And then
do you still have it?
It's probably in a box in the crawl space of my parents' home. And then in 2007, when they had a reunion tour, I tried to do an interview with him. I spoke to his publicist.
Right.
I spoke to Eddie Van Halen's publicist, and I just wasn't getting anywhere. And I feel like it may have become because you know, I kind of written an article where I was kind of making fun of myself for like worshiping David Lee Roth. So
Right,
maybe
right.
he didn't take that so well because I did
Oh.
mention he had a big ego, which everyone
Right.
knows.
Of course.
I don't think that's news to David Lee Roth that
No,
he has a big
not
ego,
at
to
all.
be
No, but
honest.
at the time I was like, no, I was 17. It's like, I am going to marry David Lee Roth. That's just the way it's going to be. He's going to move
That's
to
awesome.
Toronto. We're going to watch the
Right?
Leafs every Saturday.
Yeah.
That's what David Lee Roth is going to do.
Oh, I
That
love
sounds
it.
like a decent life. Hard hitting to wrap this up. The best Slurpee flavor of all time.
Coke.
Oh,
That
is
was
it?
quick. Ooh.
No
Wow.
hesitation. No
Really?
hesitation. I'm a
Okay.
purist and a traditionalist. So there you go. Right?
That's awesome.
Like Coke is the traditional Slurpee.
Is it?
And oh yes. And I have relatives in Winnipeg, which I believe is the Slurpee capital of the world. That's what I've been told.
Winnipeg?
More Slurpee.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
more Slurpee consumption than any other city in North America. I think.
Really?
I learned something new.
Yeah.
I think so. Double check on that. But my cousins got me into Slurpees, and every time I go to Winnipeg now, I've got to stop for a Slurpee, even if it's in January, which I did last year. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I would've-
Slurpee in January in Winnipeg. I don't know how many people are checking all of those boxes
Well,
at the
you
same
want to hear
time.
something funny? I go to Winnipeg every year to watch the Leafs play the Jets.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Because my cousin there has great seats.
Yeah.
Like seasons tickets holder for the Jets games. And so I go, and my cousin goes. Her mother refuses to go to that game specifically because she's outraged there's so many Leafs fans in the audience.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's so many Winnipeggers who cheer for the Leafs, and that's something she finds offensive.
Right. I like that, though. I like that she holds that opinion. She should.
Oh,
she
yeah.
should feel
She's
that
like,
way.
I would too. I mean, if I went to a Leafs game and I saw like half of the people there from Toronto cheering for the other team, I wouldn't be that happy about it either.
Yeah.
No, you have to feel for Senators and Sabres fans a little bit in our region because when the Leafs play there, they get inundated with a whole bunch of blue and white, right?
Absolutely.
Well, the other week when the Leafs were in Buffalo before the game, Lindy Ruff was asked, what's the key to the win, and he said, "Well, we got to take the crowd out of it." Okay, hold on, Lindy, you're playing in Buffalo.
You're playing from home.
Yeah.
You know why? Because it's cheaper to fill your car with gas and drive to Buffalo and get a hotel there.
Exactly.
To get tickets to a Leafs game.
Exactly.
Sadly, yes.
Randy,
but I do go every year. I go every year with my nephew, and
that's good.
He was 6 or 7 years old last year. He almost started a fight with a drunk 30-year-old Flyers fan. So
dear.
It's always an adventure going anywhere with a child.
It is.
It can be.
It is.
For sure.
Randy, this has been fantastic. Tell everybody where they can find you and things like that.
Okay, well, my book's available pretty much everywhere. Amazon, sometimes yes, sometimes no, because they run out of stock and they take a while to replenish. But you can buy it in a brick and mortar store. You can buy it online at Indigo, Barnes and Noble, or you can go to my website. I have a website specifically, as you know, because you made the Slurpee reference. And you didn't speak about Will Ferrell, which surprises me, but that's in there. It's www.randy.ca, and Randy's with an I, of course.
Of course it is.
Yes. Like Tony with an I, but she's usually a stripper.
Wow. Randy, this has been great.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, the book again, Behind the Mask, a revealing look at 12 of the greatest goalies in hockey history. We appreciate the time. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun.
This has been Pucks in 7, available on the SiriusXM app and wherever you get your podcasts.